everyone, and welcome to another episode of AB Develops. And today we're going to be talking about arrays. In our previous episode, we talked about objects and how they're used, and almost how everything is an object in JavaScript. And that is kind of true, because today we're going to talk about arrays and how arrays are technically objects. But how do we actually create an array? Well, all arrays start with a open parentheses, open bracket, and a closing bracket. All arrays start with a opening bracket and a closing bracket. So we can see that here. And we can put anything we want inside this array. We can put strings, we can put numbers, we can even put other arrays inside this array. So we can make this an array of strings. We can even put objects inside this array. So this is how we actually create an array literal. And we can assign this to a variable and say const myArray. And then let's console.log this and see what we get back. All right, awesome. We get exactly what we put in. So what exactly is the type of this array? Let's take a look. Type of my array. Object. We see that there. So arrays are objects, and we'll see in a little bit how we can actually access properties or methods that we can do. They're called array methods, and we can do certain things with our arrays. So for all arrays can contain any type of value or any type of JavaScript value that we want. And this is helpful because arrays are helpful for different kinds of lists. Arrays are helpful to categorize information. And the way that arrays work is things will not be in a specific order in arrays. How do we actually access the information in an array? Well, we can access the information in an array by accessing its index. So the index is the place at which the value we want to get exists. Indexes in arrays always start at 0 in JavaScript. It is kind of weird, but you get used to it eventually. So to get the first value in this array, we would say let my value equal my array. And in order to be able to access this, we'll also want to create our open bracket, close bracket. And we will put in 0. And we can console.log my value. And we get 1. And that's exactly what we put in there. So you'll see also if we change this to 20, we'll get back 20. Awesome. And we can use this to actually update values too. So let's say that we wanted to update a value at this specific index. So we can say myArray, and we can put in 0, and we can assign this to a new value. So instead of this being 20, let's make it an actual number instead of a string this time, and we'll make it 30. And let's see what we get console logged out here. Awesome, 30. So we've updated the value in the array, and we can do this even for other values inside this array. So the index tells us what position inside the array any given value is. And this allows us to be able to pull that information out of an array and do something with it. So this is really helpful. So remember, indexes always start at 0 and they increment their way up. So that means that the second position in this array would have to be 1. So we can console log that, and let's see what we're getting. So we should see 2 printed out here. What do we get? Yep, exactly, 2. And we can do this so on with the third value or the second index, and we should get an array. And we do. Awesome. Now let's say that we wanted to access the actual string inside of this array. You might be asking, well, this is an array inside of an array. How would we actually do that? Well, JavaScript gives us a really cool feature to be able to do this. So we can actually add another index position to our variable here, to this value. So we can say we're going to first go to index 2, which is the third position in the array, and then we're going to pull out the first value in that array. And we should see hi printed out there without parentheses. And we do. Great. So this is called a multi-dimensional array. Well, what about objects? Well, let's access the third index, or the fourth position in the array. And let's see what we get back. Awesome. We get key and value here. So if we want to do this, we can do this in 2 ways. We can either add a dot, and we can say dot key, and that will give us the actual value in there. So we can change this to something a little bit more meaningful. So we say foo bar. And we get foo bar. And we can also, this is dot notation, of course, you remember. And we can also do bracket notation here too. So we can say key. And we get the same thing, foo bar. Awesome. So this is how you would access indexes in an array. They always start at 0, and you can access multidimensional arrays. You can access the information inside that array. So what about things that we can do with our array? Our array actually has different methods that we can use. So for instance, let's say that we want to know how long our array is, or how many items are in our array. Well, what we can do is we can get the length property of this array. So let's console.log, and we'll say my array has, have a space, and we'll say my array dot length. Put this in. My array has blank values. Put a space here too. And let's see what we get printed out. Awesome. My array has 4 values, and we can count 1, 2, 3, 4. And it does have 4 values. So this is how you would access the length, or the number of items in your array. We'll often use this to see how many items are in an array and say, well, if there's so many items in an array, I want to do this. So that's the length property in the array. There are other properties called methods in your array. So how do we actually add something to this array? We are going to add to an array. We're going to, we've already went over updating an array, but we're going to add to an array. We're going to add to the end of an array. We'll put this up here, add to end of array. We're going to add to the beginning, or the start of an array. And then we're also going to remove items from an array. There we go. And then we'll console.log our myArray down here so we can see the print. So first we're going to add an array. So how do we do that? Well, we can do myArray dot push, and this will push an item onto the end of our array. So we can push, let's push a string onto this and say, I have been pushed. And we'll push there. And we'll console.log. Nice. I have been pushed. So we've pushed a new item, which is a string, into our array. This adds it to the end of an array. How do we add something to the beginning of an array? Well, we can say myArray dot unshift, and this will insert an item at the beginning of our array. So we will say I am at the beginning of the array. We'll save that, clear our console, and run. Awesome, great. So now we see I am at the beginning of the array. Awesome. Now, how do we actually remove items from an array? So there are two ways to remove items from an array, just like there are two ways to add items to an array. You can remove from the end of an array. So we'll say remove items from the end of an array. And then we can also remove items from the beginning of an array. So how do we remove items from the end of the array? So we'll say myArray dot pop. And this will remove the last item that we added into this array. So remember down here, we'll say I have been pushed is at the end of this array. So let's see what happens after we pop. All right, so we no longer see the end, we no longer see I have been pushed, that string, at the end of our array there. What about removing it from the beginning of an array? Well, to remove it from the beginning of the array, what we would do is say myArray dot shift. And this will remove the first element from the beginning of the array here. And we'll console.log, clear that, and we'll log this out. And awesome. Now we're back to the original array that we created up here. So we've went through adding an array at the end, adding an item at the end of the array. We've went through adding an item at the start of the array. We've went through removing items from the end of the array. And we've went to removing items at the beginning of the array. Now you may be asking yourself, how do I actually remove items in the middle of an array? So how do we remove an item at a certain index in the array? So for instance, let's say that I no longer wanted this array here. Well, how would we do that? Well, let's write our comments here. So we'll say remove item at a given index. So we're going to use the splice method. And we'll see that this has a number, and it also has a delete count. So we could start from whatever we want to, and we could delete many items in the array. But we only want to delete one item in the array. So we need to give it, we can give it up to 3 values. So for instance, we could say, well, I want to replace this value, and we'll see how to do that in a minute. But right now, we're going to give it 2 values. So the first value is going to be the value of the index at which we want to start. So let's count. 0, 1, 2. So we want to start at index 2. And we only want to delete one item. So we just want to delete one item here. So we'll start there, and we'll delete one item. So let's save that, and we'll log that out. And you'll notice that now we see 22, and where's our array? It's gone. So you'll notice that the splice method allows us to start at a given index, and then we can remove how many items we want to delete. So for instance, if we wanted to delete 2 items, we wanted to delete both the array and the object, we put in 2. And we can clear the console, and we can see what that looks like. And now we're left with the first 2 items in the array. Now, let's say that we wanted to replace an item. So we want to replace an item here. So what we can do is we can actually go in, and what we'll do is we'll comment this out here, just so that we're not doing double work here. And then we'll make another comment, and we'll say replace item at a given index. And we'll say my array, because this is the array that we want to manipulate, and we'll say splice. And we'll do the same thing that we did before, so we'll start at index 2. We only want to do this to one element here, and we're going to put what we want to put in here. So this is going to be the item that we want to replace it with. So we're going to replace it with maybe a month of the year, so we'll say January. We'll save that, run it in the console, and awesome, it replaced exactly what we wanted to replace. So we spliced, or we removed this array and replaced it with our text here. Awesome. So this has been a rundown of arrays. So for a quick recap, we discussed what arrays are, how to create an array between these 2 brackets. We talked about all the different things that you can put in an array. So you can put strings, numbers, other arrays, objects. Really, the sky's the limit when it comes to arrays. You can even have arrays inside of arrays inside of arrays, or objects inside of objects. Whatever it is that you want to put in this array, you can put in the array as long as it's separated by commas, or comma value items. And we discussed how to access any given position in the array with the index. And the index starts at 0, and it counts up to how many positions are in the array. And then we went over how to some of the array methods. So we can add to arrays. We can add at the beginning of the array. We can add at the end of an array. We can remove from the beginning of an array. We can remove from the end of the array. And then we can also insert items at specific indexes or specific positions in the array. And we can even replace items in the array. So this has been Arrays. Hopefully you find this helpful. If you did, go ahead and like and subscribe to my channel. I try to put out content probably about 1 video a week, goes over different things, and the goal is to help new developers to be able to get their first job in web dev, or to even be able to make a career out of web dev. So once again, if you like my channel, go ahead and subscribe, go ahead and like the video down below, and I will see you in the next one.